Alright, in this video, this is the final section in Chapter 4, Section 4F. It deals with understanding the federal budget. Okay, so here we're going to go over, we'll talk about the federal budget basics, like receipts or income that represents money that has been collected, outlays, or sometimes they call it expenses, that represent money that has been spent. And your net income will always be equal to receipts minus the outlays. Now, if your net income is a positive value, then that means the budget has a surplus. Or if the net income is negative, then in this case your budget will have a deficit. Okay? So here we're going to determine whether or not you have a surplus or a deficit, as in example 1. Suppose your after-tax income, annual income, is $41,000. Your annual expenses are $11,000 for rent, $7,000 for food and household expenses, $1,100 for interest on credit cards, and $8,800 for entertainment, travel, and other. And here we're going to answer questions A through C. So in part A, do we have a surplus or a deficit? Okay. And you're given the choice of answers here. Now, first of all, we do have a annual income of $41,000. That would be, of course, our receipts. It should be 41,000, not 14,000. Now we need to find out what our expenses are. Okay, we have $11,000 for rent, $7,000 for food and household expenses, $11,000 for interest on the credit cards, $1,100. And then we have in this case $8,800 for entertainment, travel, and others. So in this case, if we add those expenses together, you're going to get $27,900. So our expenses is $27,900. So to find the net income, that's going to be, in this case here, the receipts minus the outlays or expenses. So your receipts is $41,000 minus the outlays or expenses of $27,900 will end up with $13,100. So here we came up with a positive amount. So that means that there is a surplus here. And of course, we know it can't be C or D. It has to be A or B. And we have to kind of read the answer itself, the choice of answers. There is a surplus because the sum of the expenses is less than the income. Okay, and pretty much you can see $27,900 is less than the income of $41,000 after tax. Now, part B, next year you expect to get a 5% raise and you think you can keep your expenses unchanged with one exception. You plan to spend $7,200 on a car, and explain the effect of this purchase on your budget. Okay. Let's see how much this person would get after that 5% raise. Here's let's say that after-tax annual income was $41,000. 5% raise, well, 5% as a decimal will be 0.05, and you're going to multiply 41,000 times 0.05 to get $2,050. That's the amount of the raise. Now we're going to add that amount to the after-tax income of $41,000. So if I add 41,000, so if I add 41,000 to the $2,050, his after-tax annual income will be $43,050. Okay. Now we're going to keep our expenses unchanged, so we're going to subtract the expenses of $27,900 from the $43,050. And then we're also going to subtract how much we plan to spend on a car. That's $7,200. Okay, so our new net income, so here we do $48,050 minus $27,900 minus $7,200, we'll get $12,950, which is still a positive net income. The only thing different here is, with this net income that we got in Part A and the one we got in Part B, is our surplus will be reduced. Okay. We'll still have a positive surplus, but it's just going to be reduced by about $150. Okay, now Part C. As in Part B, assume you get a 5% raise for the next year, but instead decide not to purchase a car. If you can limit your expenses to a 1% increase over the prior year, could you afford $7,900 in tuition and fees without going into debt? Okay. So now here we got $27,900, which is our expenses. Okay. Now we're not going to buy the car. Okay. So our expenses is $27,900, and we're going to limit that to a 1% increase. That means 0.01 for 1%. Multiply that by $27,900. That'd be like $279. Then I'm going to add that $27,900 to the $279. That would be $28,179. So here our expenses will increase to an amount of $28,179. Now, we're going to take that $43,050, which is our amount after the 5% raise. We're going to subtract $28,179, And also, we're going to subtract the tuition and fees of $7,900. So here we're going to end up with, let's see, 43,050 minus 28,179 minus 7,900. We'll end up with $6,971. That will be our surplus. Okay, so based on that, we can afford the tuition and fees without going into debt. Okay. Okay, so that's how we can determine whether we have a surplus or a deficit. Okay, next we'll talk about what debt is versus what deficit is. A deficit represents money that is borrowed or taken from savings during a single year. The debt is the total amount of money owed to lenders, which may result from accumulating deficits over many years. Okay. All right, so now in this next example, okay, now here we're going to be using the accompanying budget summary for the Wonderful Widget Company to complete parts A through D below. Now, here is that data table that we're going to be using here to answer parts A through D. Okay. Let's start with part A. Based on the accumulated debt at the end of 2017, calculate the 2018 interest payment. Assume an interest rate of 8.2%. Okay. Now let's take a look at this right here. Now, this is for 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2017. 2018, part of it is complete. We do have the total receipts, and then we have our outlays that are given to us. What's missing is the interest on the debt. Okay? Interest on the debt. Now, the bottom row says the accumulated debt. The last accumulated debt was a negative $763, but here it's in thousands of dollars, so that's actually negative $763,000. Okay? So now I'm going to take this amount of negative 763. I'm going to do this up here. We're going to multiply that by the interest rate of 8.2%. Now 8.2% as a decimal will be 0.082. So I'm going to do negative 763 times 0.082. Now here, in this case, I'm going to round this off to the nearest whole number. So negative 62.5 to the nearest whole number will be like negative 63. Okay. So that's like a debt, well, in this case, of the interest on debt, that's going to be, we're going to drop the negative and just say 63. That's the interest on the debt. So here, to answer part A, the 2018 interest payment is, now they say dollars, but here in this case, it's in thousands of dollars. So if I take 63, multiply it by 1,000, you'll get 63,000. So the interest payment for 2018 is $63,000, okay? Because you have to read very carefully. It does say in thousands of dollars, so that 63 has to be multiplied by 1,000. Now, part B is to calculate the total over outlays for 2018, the year-end surplus or deficit, and the year-end accumulated debt. Okay. So to find out what the total outlays are, let's add these outlays that are given here. The 602, 199, 247, and 63. That would give us 1,111. Okay. So for those total outlays, and I'll go ahead and write this out. I just added 602, 199, 247, and 63 to get 1111. But of course, our budget summary is in thousands of dollars, so you have to multiply that by 1,000. That will give you 1111 with 3 zeros. And that's actually going to be $1,111,000. And now for the 2018 year-end surplus or deficit, we take the receipts, which is this amount of 1058 minus the outlays, 1111. That would give us, in this case, negative 53. Okay. Now that negative 53 is in thousands of dollars. So in this case here, we got to take the negative 53, multiply it by 1,000. And this will be negative $53,000. Okay. And then the year-end accumulated debt. Okay, let's see how we can do this one. Here we're going to have to add these two together because this is the accumulated debt from 2017. To find the accumulated debt of 2018, we subtract our deficit here from the negative 763, or we can add those two negative amounts together, like negative 763 plus negative 53. This will be negative 816. And again, this is in thousands of dollars, so we need to multiply by 1,000. We'll get negative $816,000. So that represents the year-end accumulated debt for 2018. And now part C, based on the accumulated debt at the end of 2018, calculate the 2019 interest payment. Again, assuming an 8.2% interest rate. Okay. So here, that's a negative 816. So we need to take that and multiply that by 0.82 to get the interest rate, because that interest rate is 8.2%. So and let me go ahead and drop off the negative because the interest is going to be a positive number. So 816 times 0.082. And to the nearest whole number, that's going to be 67. And this is again in thousands of dollars, so we need to multiply by 1,000. So it'll be $67,000. That would be the interest payment for 2019. Okay. Now, Part D. Assume that in 2019 the company has receipts of $1,105,000, holds operating expenses and employee benefits to their 2018 levels, and spends no money on security. Calculate total outlays for 2019. That's the year-end surplus or deficit and the year-end accumulated debt. Okay, so I'm going to go down to this table here. I'm going to add 2019 here onto the side. The total receipts, that was $1,105,000. So I'm going to write this as this. I can do this. Take that 1,105,000 with 3 zeros, divide that by 1,000. That'll be 1,105. Operating expenses and employee benefits will be at their 2018 level. So this will still be 602. The employee benefits will still be 199. Security is 0. Okay? We're not going to be, no money will be spent on security. Okay? Now the interest on the debt was, back in Part C, 67,000. But if we divide by 1,000, we have to use 67. Okay? Because our table is in thousands of dollars. And we have it in dollars, so in thousands of dollars, we divide by 1,000 to get the 67. Now for the total outlays, we're going to add these numbers together. Add 602 plus 199 plus 0 plus 67. That will be the total outlays here, 868 or $868,000. So if you take 868 multiply by 1,000 because they want that in dollars, so it'll be $868,000. And then for the 2019 year-end surplus or the deficit, in this case here, we take our receipts and subtract the outlays. So we take the 1,105, subtract 868 from it, you're going to get a surplus of $237. Well, 237, but it's actually going to be in thousands of dollars, so you have to multiply by 1,000. That'll give you $237,000. And then for 2019, the year-end accumulated debt will be, well, let's take our surplus of 237, add negative 816, which is that accumulated debt at the end of 2018. So I'm going to do negative 816 plus 237. We're going to end up with a negative 579. Multiply that by 1,000 because they want it in dollars. It'll be negative $579,000. Okay. Okay. So that's how we use that table to come up with our total outlays, find out what the surplus or the deficit will be, and what the accumulated debt would be. Okay. All right, next we'll talk about the federal budget. There's a great debate about how much of a problem the federal deficits and the growing debt poses for our future. Like in this example here, suppose the government decides to pay off the $18 trillion debt with a one-time charge distributed equally among the 200 million person civilian workforce. How much would each worker be charged? Okay. Let's see, 18 trillion dollar debt. If I was to write that as a whole number, I'll have the 18, but place value is going to be this. You have your ones place with 3 numbers, and then the thousands period has 3 numbers, and then million has 3 numbers, and then billion 3 numbers, and then trillion, again 3 numbers. So in this case, if I want to write 18 trillion as a number, in the trillions period it will be 18, and then all these other numbers behind it will be zeros here. So I have 18 with 3, 6, 9, 12 zeros. Now, we're going to divide that by the 200 million person civilian workforce. Well, the millions right here, so I know I'm going to have 200 here for these spaces. The thousands and the ones will be 0. So I know I'm going to have 200 with 6 zeros behind it. And let's see if we can, well, actually I can do this in my head or mentally, because these 3 zeros can divide up with these 3 zeros. These 3 zeros here can divide up with these 3 zeros here. So what I'm going to do here is take the 18 with 6 zeros, divide that by the 200. And that will give me an answer of 90,000. So each worker will be charged $90,000 based on that. Okay. All right, next we'll talk about the gross domestic product, or GDP. That is the most commonly used measure of the overall size of the national economy. Economists generally consider numbers for federal revenue and spending to be more meaningful when expressed as a percentage of GDP than in absolute dollars, for much the same reason that your own spending depends upon your income. So in example 4, we're going to consider that table showing past and projected federal revenue, spending, and GDP. Our figures are in billions of dollars, rounded to the nearest billion. Find the deficit or surplus and debt as a percentage of GDP in 2000 and 2010. Comment on those changes here. Okay, so let's start off with the year 2000. Here we want to find out that what the percentage, what the surplus is, what percentage, and the debt as a percentage of GDP is what percent. All right, so let's find the surplus percent. That's going to be, in this case, and this is in the year 2000, that's at 232, which is a surplus. And that's going to be divided by the GDP in 2000, which is 9,822, times 100%. So here we got 232 divided by 9822 times 100. Now here we're going to round to one decimal place, so this amount will be approximately 2.4%. So the surplus is about 2.4%, and the debt as a percentage of GDP. So let's find that. Our debt here for 2000 is 5,000. Divided by the GDP for 2000 was 9822 times 100%. So 5,000 divided by 9822 times 100 will give you, to one decimal place, 50.9%. So here, the debt as a percentage of GDP will be 50.9%. Okay. And now for 2010. The deficit is going to be some percentage. Here in this case here, we got a deficit in 2010 of negative 1,406. Now in this case, I'm going to leave out the negative because I know we have a deficit of 1,406. That's going to be divided by the GDP in 2010, 13,935 times 100%. And to one decimal place, this amount will be 10.1%. Okay, so the deficit is 10.1%. And then the debt as a percentage of GDP here, our debt was 13,000 for 2010. Divided by the GDP in 2010, 13,935 times 100%. And to one decimal place, that's going to be 93.3%. That represents the debt as a percentage of GDP. Okay, now let's comment on the changes here. The deficit or surplus changed by blank percentage points, and the debt changed by blank percentage points. And we're going to round to one decimal place. So here, your change in the deficit, or in this case, or surplus. Now in this case here, we had a deficit 10.1%, so we're going to say negative 10.1% minus the surplus in 2000 was a positive 2.4%. So if we subtract those, we're going to get a negative negative 12.5%. So we're going to say negative 12.5 percentage points. And that's without the percent sign when you're doing the homework. And now for your change in debt. Okay, and that negative 12.5 percentage points is that deficit from 2000 to 2010. Now for the change in debt from 2000 to 2010, that debt was 93.3% in 2010, minus the debt percentage in 2000 was 50.9. So if I subtract those two, this will be 42.4 percentage points. Okay. So that's how we do that particular problem dealing with GDP, or gross domestic product. Okay, here's another example of that. Here we're going to consider the table showing past and projected federal revenue, spending, and GDP. All figures are in billions of dollars and rounded to the nearest billion. Find the deficit as a percentage of GDP in 2010 and 2020 projected. And then what is the percentage change during this period? Okay, so here we're going to find out what the deficit is as a percent based on the GDP. And this was in 2010. So for 2010, the deficit as a percent would be the deficit amount divided by the GDP times 100%. So here, that deficit was in 2010, 1,281. I'm going to use a positive value. Divide that by the GDP in 2010, 14,843 times 100%. Now to one decimal place, we will get approximately 8.6%. So the deficit as a percentage of GDP in 2010 was 8.6%. Okay. And then what was the deficit as a percentage of GDP in 2020 projected? So, for 2020, the projected deficit as a percent of our GDP is the deficit amount divided by, again, the GDP times 100%. So your deficit for 2020 projected was 533, and I'm leaving off the negative here. Divide that by the GDP in 2020 will be 25,200 times 100%. So here, 533 divided by 25,200 times 100. To one decimal place, this will be approximately 2.1%. So the deficit as a percentage of GDP in 2020 projected will be 2.1%. And then finally, what is the percentage change during this period? So to find the percent of change, I'm going to take the new value, that is the deficit in 2020, minus the old value, that's going to be the deficit in 2010, divide that by the old value, multiplied by 100%. So here, the new value was the projected deficit as a percent in 2020 will be 2.1%. I'm going to leave off the percent sign, minus the deficit in 2010, that's 8.6. Divide that by the old value, which is the one for 2010, which is 8.6 times 100. Now in this case here, if I do 2.1 minus 8.6, minus, that's going to be negative 6.5. That's going to be divided by 8.6 times 100%. Now I'm going to round that final answer to one decimal place. So I got negative 6.5 divided by 8.6 times 100. This will be a negative 75.6% if I round to one decimal place. So negative 75.6%, that represents the percentage change. Okay, next we'll look at following the money. All right, the spending categories fall into two major groups. One is mandatory outlays. Those are expenses that are paid automatically unless Congress acts to change them. Most of the mandatory outlays are for entitlements such as Social Security, Medicare, and other payments to individuals. They're called entitlements because the law specifically states the conditions under which individuals are entitled to them. Interest on the debt is also a mandatory outlay because it must be paid to prevent the government from being in default on its loans. Okay. And then next is discretionary outlays. Those are the ones that Congress must vote on each year and that the president must then sign into law. In the spending pie chart, discretionary expenses are subdivided into those that affect national defense and security and all the rest. That's non-defense discretionary: education, roads and transportation, agriculture, food and drug safety, consumer protection, housing, space program, energy development, scientific research, international aid, and other programs. Okay, now I know that's in black and white, but here is the color version of that particular pie chart that you see here. So for federal revenue, you can see that 33% or 1/3 is for Social Security, Medicare, and other social insurance receipts. 40% is individual income taxes. And then corporate income taxes is 9%, excise tax 3%, other 6%. And then the federal spending is right here. And by the way, the blue you can see are discretionary outlays. The pink is your mandatory outlays. So here, these are your mandatory outlays here for Social Security, Medicare, interest on debt, Medicaid, government pensions, and other mandatory spending. And then your discretionary outlays are your non-defense discretionary and defense and homeland security. Okay. So now let's look at some examples of all of this here. Suppose that the federal debt in 2020 is $20 trillion. If interest rates remain at the 2016 level of 2.9%, find the annual interest payment on the debt. How much does the interest payment change with the 0.4 point increase in the interest rate? Okay. Now, we got $20 trillion. Now, if you remember, trillion has 12 zeros behind it when I did one of the examples here. So if I convert 20 trillion like this, it'll be 20 and then 12 zeros. Okay. And now what we're going to do here is take that amount of 20 trillion we're going to multiply that by the interest of 2.9%. 2.9% as a decimal will be 0.029. I'm going to see what I can do here on this calculator here if it'll let me do it. Clear this out. Let's see, if I do 20 times 0.029, 0.029, I'll get that amount. And then multiply that by 1 trillion. 1 with 12 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then hit enter. It's going to give me this in scientific notation. But in this case here, that 5.8 with e to the 11, that means that there is going to be, if I move this over one place, I'm going to need 10 zeros behind it. So I'm going to have a 5, 8, and then 10 zeros. Okay. And this is actually read 580, and that's million. This is in billions here. So it'll be 580 billion. Okay. And what I did here, I got one decimal place. I can move it over one place, but I have to move it over another 10 places, so I need 10 zeros. So this will be the interest increases from $580 billion and then to how many billion dollars here? So here the new interest rate the 2016 interest rate was 2.9%. And we're going to add a 0.4 point increase. And of course, the point represents 1%, but it's a 0.4%, which would give us 3.3%. Okay? So I'm going to be using that. So I'm going to say 20 trillion times 3.3% will be 0.033. And then I'm going to do 20 times 0.033. That would be that amount. But of course, 1 trillion has to be a 1 with 12 zeros. And then in this case here, I need to move it over one place, but I need to move it over again 10 places, so I need 10 zeros behind it. So this will be 66 with 10 zeros. And this is going to end up in billions, so this will be 660 billion. Because that's the ones, period, thousands, period, millions, period, and then your billions, period. So this will be $660 billion. And then the interest rate increased by what percent, and the interest payment increased by what percent. Okay, so here to find that out, let's see. The interest rate increased. Okay, by what percent? Okay, in this case here, there was a 0.4 increase, 0.4 point increase. Then that's going to be divided by the old interest rate of 2.9%. So it'll be 0.4 divided by 2.9 times 100%. Okay, so 0.4 divided by 2.9 times 100. And they want this to the nearest whole number in this particular problem. So here, 13.7 will round up to 14. So the interest rate increased by about 14%. The interest payment increased by what percent? Well, here we take the new minus the old divided by the old times 100%. The old amount says $580 billion, but I'm going to use just 580. I'm sorry, the new was 660 billion. Let's use the 660. Minus the old was 580. Divide that by the old amount of 580 times 100%. And that's going to be rounded to the nearest whole number. Let's see, 660 minus 580 would be this amount. Divide that by 580 times 100. To the nearest whole number, it's going to be 14%. So here the interest payment increases by about 14%. Okay. Assume, well, let's talk about future predictions here. The only way to get future deficits under control is to either reduce mandatory spending on entitlements, raise taxes, or do some combination of the two. Okay, so in example 7, we're assuming that the composition of federal outlays and receipts shown in the figure remain the same in 2017. Also assume that the total revenue for 2017 was $2.8 trillion and the total spending was $3.1 trillion. How much 2017 revenue came from individual income taxes? How much came from the category Social Security, Medicare, and other social insurance receipts? Now here is a pie chart, and I realize that it is in black and white, but I am going to put this up here as one that's in color. You can see the green is from the individual income taxes, and they give the percent, 53%. The other is in that blue, 5%. The red is the Social Security, Medicare, and other Social Security receipts, 31%. The small purple piece of the pie excise taxes 3%. The yellow is from corporate income taxes, and that's 8%. Okay, so let's find out the amount of the 2017 revenue that came from the individual income taxes. Okay, so we're going to have to use the 2.8 trillion because that's the total revenue. Okay. Okay. So here 2.8 trillion, that's your revenue. Okay. So to find the revenue, and I'm going to abbreviate revenue from individual income taxes, IIT, individual income taxes. That's going to be 2.8 trillion multiplied by, now for the individual income taxes it says 53%. Now 53% as a decimal will be 0.53. So if I do 2.8 times 0.53, I'm going to get 1.84, but I need to multiply by 1 trillion, which is a 1 with 12 zeros. Okay. Now in this case here, I got 1.484 e to the 12. That means I need to move that decimal point 12 places to the right. So I only got room for 3 places I can move to the right. I need to move it another 9 places. So I need 9 zeros behind it. So I'm going to have a 1484, and then I had to put 9 zeros behind it. So in this case here, this will be actually 1.84, and they want that as how many trillion? So as a decimal, I could leave it like that, 1.84 trillion. Now, we have to round that out to the nearest hundred. So 1.84 trillion will be approximately, to 2 decimal places, 1.48 trillion. Okay. So that's the revenue from individual income taxes. The other part is the amount of 2017 revenue that came from the category of Social Security, Medicare, and other social insurance receipts. So here, the revenue from, I'm going to say SS for Social Security, that's going to be equal to 2.8 trillion times, now that amount is 31% from Social Security, Medicare, and other social insurance receipts. 31% as a decimal will be 0.31 times 2.8. Now in this case, that's going to be 0.868, but here I'm going to multiply that by 1 with 12 zeros, since it's in trillion. This would be 868 if I move this over 2 places, but then I need 9 more zeros behind it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's actually in the millions place, so this is $868 million. I mean billion. Billion with a B. Okay, so that's the amount that came from Social Security, Medicare, and other social insurance receipts. Okay. All right, next we'll look at strange numbers, publicly held gross debt. And there are two kinds of national debt. One of them is publicly held debt or net debt. That represents the money the government must pay to individuals and institutions that bought treasury issues. And then the gross debt would be including both the publicly held debt and money that the government owes to its own trust funds, such as the Social Security Trust Fund. Okay, and now we got unified budget, on budget, and off budget. The unified budget represents all federal revenues and spending. Off budget is going to be the portion of the unified budget that is involved in Social Security. On budget is the rest of the unified budget, everything that is not involved in Social Security. So therefore, the following relationship holds. Your unified net income will be the unified net income subtracted from it, the off-budget net income will be equal to your on-budget net income. Okay. So in this example 8, let's say the government has a unified net income of $60 billion, but was supposed to deposit $160 billion in Social Security, in the Social Security Trust Fund. What was the on-budget surplus or deficit? And explain. Okay, so we're going to use this formula up here. We're going to take our unified net income, subtract from it the off-budget net income, and that's going to be equal to our on-budget net income. Now, in unified net income, that's right here, $60 billion. Okay, that's given to you. So we're just going to say 60 billion. We're not going to write out what 60 billion is as a regular number. The off-budget net income was the amount that was supposed to be deposited, $160 billion. Well, if you do 60 minus 160, you're going to end up with a negative amount of $100 billion. Now, in this case, since it is negative, we have what they call an on-budget deficit. Okay, so negative $100 billion. And that's because the government overspent its unified net income on Social Security. Okay. Okay. All right, this last example deals with a tax increase. In this case, suppose someone began counting a federal debt of approximately $16 trillion, $2 at a time. If he could count $2 each second, how long will it take to complete the count? Specify that answer in years and assume that there are 365 days in a single year. Okay, we're going to have to do some converting from, days, from years to all the way down to seconds. Okay? Well, here we got 365 days in a single year. Now we're going to have to think about this. In one day, there are 24 hours in a single day. So we need to multiply that by 24 hours. So I'm going to put that in the numerator where I'm converting from days to hours. That goes in the denominator. Now, in 24 hours, for 24 hours, every hour has 60 minutes in it. So we need to multiply that by 60 minutes per 1 hour. And for every minute, there's 60 seconds. So 60 seconds multiplied by 1 minute. Because we have to go all the way down to seconds here. Now you're going to see these days, hours, minutes divide out. And then if I multiply 365 times 24 times 60 times another 60, I will get this number, 31,536,000 seconds in a year. Okay, and now, if he could count $2 each second. So, let's take that 31,536,000 seconds in a year, multiply that by $2 per second. And you can see here these seconds are going to divide out. So it's going to be some money amount per year. So it'd be this times 2. That'd be $63,072,000 a year. Okay. And the federal debt is approximately $16 trillion. Well, that 16 trillion means 16 with 12 zeros behind it. We're going to divide that by that $63,072,000 per year. Let's see if I can enter all that in the calculator. 16 with 12 zeros. Divide that by 63,072 with 3 zeros. Now, if we round that out to the nearest thousands of years, let's see, divide that by 1,000. Here you would get I'm sorry. We don't need that. It's this amount that we need. And I'm going to round that up to the nearest whole number, by the way. Actually, I'll write this out. 253,678.3359 to the nearest 1,000. We have to look at the number that's in the thousands place. That's going to be that 3 right there. Next to it is a 6. That 6 is bigger than 5, so we increase the 3 to a 4. So it'll be 254, and these numbers will change to a 0. We drop everything after the decimal point. So it will be approximately 254,000 years to complete the count. Okay, so that will complete this video dealing with how to understand the federal budget.